Hi everyone, the Partial Prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. So today I want to talk about Trump's peace plan number 2. Okay, but first I wanted to talk about the fiery furnace. So I believe that we are in the midst of the fiery furnace, and so and I think it started like August 4th. And because August 4th was the explosion in Beirut, Lebanon, and then August 6th was when Israel started getting those incendiary balloons from Gaza. And so the picture on the right hand side of the screen shows, okay, so it says a field in Nahar Garar burns as incendiary balloons launch from Gaza incite blazes in southern Israel. So this picture's from August 17th, but it started on August 6th and it went for like 3 weeks in Israel. And then on the right hand side, and then in the meantime in America, the lake fire burns a home in Angeles National Forest on August 13, 2020, north of Santa Clarita, California. So the fires have been really bad in the west of America. California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and other places. So that's what I believe. And I really think it could be connected to judgment for this peace plan. So let's talk about the peace plan, okay? Okay, so this peace plan, and whenever I say peace, I'm always picturing quotes in my head because I just don't really think this is real peace. Trump called it the Abrahamic Accord, and I actually read an article that he wanted to name it after himself, but he didn't think that would go over very well. So it's called the Abrahamic Accord, and that connects to because the 3 groups of people that the peace deal is with are all considered children of Abraham. And it was announced on August 13th of 2020, which is also Ab 23. And so what's kind of interesting about these dates is I've talked about before about how 13 and 23 have seemed to be numbers that are connected to Obama. So very interesting that that these were the dates. And then it was the 80th day of rioting in the United States. So all very interesting. It was a quote unquote peace deal between Israel, America, and the United Arab Emirates. So just kind of a quick overview about this peace deal. So now this one, okay, so remember Trump had what people had dubbed the deal of the century that came out on January 28th of this year in 2020. That one was he actually had 181 written pages, and so people really knew more kind of what that deal was. Okay, this one I don't believe there's any paperwork that I've seen anyway, and so mostly there's just kind of 1-page summary or whatever on the White House website. And so it was a quote unquote peace deal between Israel, America, and the United Arab Emirates. And so one of the things that people mentioned about it, that they complained about it, is they felt like it was put together quickly. They felt like the motivating factor to put it together quickly was like Trump and Netanyahu were trying to get it in. Like Trump was probably maybe trying to get it in before election, but also the motivation for Israel to get it in is, because obviously they wouldn't have faith that the next president, if Trump didn't win, they wouldn't necessarily believe that Biden would want to put together something like that, um, or could put something together like that. So that was maybe a motivating factor to put it together quickly. And so the page on the White House website, it said remarks by President Trump announcing the normalization of relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And so they talk about, like, one of the purposes, maybe the motivation for some of these Arab countries to get involved is it's it's really related to about dealing with Iran, and really it has a lot to do with a lot of these other Arab countries really don't want to have to deal with Iran. So I think they're hoping that Israel and America will um, take care of Iran for them. So that might be their motivating factor. Um, and okay, so this is what was written on the White House website. It said they will exchange embassies and ambassadors and begin cooperation across the board and on a broad range of areas, including tourism, education, healthcare, trade, and security. Huh. I guess I was expecting that to say something about Iran, um, but it's kind of interesting because I mean, I think it might say something on the web page about Iran. I just didn't put it here, but it's kind of interesting because oh, see, it the security. See, this is what I'm saying. It's kind of a quick summary, and so I'm thinking the security is, the word security here is kind of how they're mentioning Iran. And so, but it is kind of interesting because if you read about the other areas, it includes tourism, education, healthcare, trade. So it's really a lot of, and it's funny because security is even like listed last. And so it's quite the, like, I really just kind of see Trump as being like a merchant, um, and he's all about the economy and um, um, trade and, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that could be a big part of the motivating factor for United Arab Emirates. They're a rich country, and um, I'm sure, they would love to, be able to, do some trade with Israel and America. One of the, first things that happened because of this peace deal was the flight from Israel to the United Arab Emirates, that happened on Monday of last week. And, so basically it was about starting flights between the countries and stuff. So just, really probably more of a focus on the trade and things like that. Okay, and so then what's interesting about this is that Trump expects other countries to jump on board. So here's what he said about that. Now that the ice has been broken, I expect more Arab and Muslim countries will follow the United Arab Emirates lead. And actually it was kind of interesting because we did have Kosovo and like Serbia, I guess, also are kind of like jumping on board. But so what's kind of interesting is that Trump kind of has this delusional belief that if he can get enough Arab nations involved, if he can just get the whole Middle East to just normalize their relations between each other, that then he will get Iran and Palestine. to, join in, because, he doesn't understand that the issues between Israel and Iran and Israel and the Palestinians they're not economic issues, they're religious issues and or spiritual issues, and it really has to do with the fact that Iran and Palestine hate Israel. And you can't fix it with money, and I mean that's why you don't negotiate with terrorists, because it's not a financial problem, it's not an economic problem. It's a matter, it has to do with matters of the heart, and the Iran and the Palestinians have wicked hearts, and they want to get rid of Israel. And you can't solve that with money. So one of the questions that I had is it land for peace? Okay, so what was very interesting about this peace deal is that the United Arab Emirates, they believe the deal includes the suspension of annexation of the West Bank. Netanyahu believed, when they talked about suspending the annexation, that it was just a temporary thing. And UAE thought, okay, this is, it's not going to happen. So that was kind of interesting. And then, so I put in this verse from Deuteronomy, and it says, "You shall not move your neighbor's boundary mark, which the ancestors have set, in your inheritance, which you will inherit in the land that the Lord your God gives you to possess." So, there's, God has said it quite a few times, that we're not supposed to mess with the land of Israel. And so these peace deals, it's kind of been a tradition in America. Well, and not even just America, but just other previous peace deals with Israel. A lot of times they include Israel giving up land. Okay, and then what always happens, and people don't learn from history, is that it does not create peace. Okay, it actually makes things harder, because Israel's enemies end up like moving closer and being right on their border and stuff like that. And so it's and really what ends up happening too is Israel ends up losing God's blessing because they're not obeying God. So anyways, and so then how does this peace deal connect to peace and safety? Okay, well, both Trump and Netanyahu use the words peace, security, and prosperity in their follow-up speeches on the deal. Okay? So I definitely think this is peace and safety. And so from 1 Thessalonians 5:3, we read, "While they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape." Okay, so I highlighted they, okay, and that's what we have going on with this peace deal, is that we're seeing both Trump and Netanyahu use those words. Okay, and then other concerns about this peace deal is, okay, so this is kind of interesting, because right after it happened, there was talk about selling American F-35 stealth fighter jets to the United Arab Emirates. There was definitely talk. Okay, they're definitely planning to sell drones to the United Arab Emirates, like military drones. But what was kind of what's concerning about this talk about it selling these F-35 stealth fighter jets to the United Arab Emirates is that, so in 2004, I believe, like the American Congress made a law that we weren't allowed to sell military equipment to Israel's enemies. I mean, without checking with Israel first, I think is how the law goes. But basically, there's this understanding between America and Israel that, um, America wanted to make sure that Israel stayed, um, like kind of this, the, that they kept their military, advantage in the Middle East. Okay, because they're surrounded by these countries that don't like them. Okay, and so, um, I don't know who this was that pushed this through Congress, but definitely a big friend of Israel. So that was neat that they did that. Well, so what's kind of sad about this, peace deal is that what we see with Trump is that he's not really like being aware of the need to, continue to honor that agreement that we made with Israel. Um, so that's a concern. Okay. And I mean, just because United Arab Emirates is being all friendly and stuff, it doesn't mean that they'll stay that way. And so you don't want to be giving these other countries an advantage over Israel. Okay, so then, I got some verses for you about this. Okay, so what's interesting is that in Daniel 11:27, we read about, okay, so some of the prophecies about the future, it says, as for both kings, their hearts will be intent on evil, and they will speak lies to each other at the same table, but it will not succeed, for the end is still to come at the appointed time. Okay, so NASB, they kind of try to squeeze in this word intent. But if you read it like this, as for both kings, their hearts will be on evil, and they will speak lies at the same table. Okay. So I'm wondering if that is a possible prophecy of this peace accord. Because what's interesting about it is that, like, especially with the annexing the West Bank and stuff, it seemed like everyone kind of walked away with different ideas of what they just all agreed on. Okay, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And so, although the only thing about this verse is that it only mentions two kings, and but that could just be a connection to Trump and Netanyahu, who I believe are the two witnesses. Okay. Um, but anyways, so just kind of interesting because, um, you know, it's just interesting how we have these people, thinking they're agreeing on something, and I don't think they really are. Um, okay, and so then in Genesis 34, I think this could be another prophetic connection. Okay, it says, but Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor with deceit, because he had defiled Dinah their sister. They said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we consent to you, if you will become like us, in that every male of you be circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters for ourselves, and we will live with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and go. Now their words seem reasonable to Hamor and Shechem, Hamar's son. So what we have is two of Jacob's sons. So they were trying to appear like they were, in this story in Genesis, they were trying to appear that they were making a deal with Shechem. Okay, Shechem wanted to, intermarry with Jacob's sons. Okay, and so they actually lied to Shechem. Okay, and they said, well, we can't do this unless you guys get circumcised. And so they agreed to do that. and then what happened is that Jacob's sons actually go and end up killing Shechem and Hamor. So, but I'm kind of wondering if, like, Jacob's sons could actually represent, um, like, I'm kind of wondering if maybe the prophetic fulfillment is kind of reverse of what we're thinking, and so that Jacob's sons maybe represent the UAE people, and Shechem and Hamor represent um, Israel and, Trump and Netanyahu, because then, Hamor and Shechem end up, the men of Shechem end up getting killed by Jacob's sons. And so, because, like, it would be kind of like this, so it says, only on this condition will we consent to you if you become like us, and that every male of you be circumcised. Okay, because what was interesting, okay, so I wrote that Israel will give the Palestinians a state. Okay, because what was very interesting is after with the Abraham Accord, right after it happened, it was, I mean, soon, it seemed pretty soon after that United Arab Emirates, and I'm assuming that maybe they got some flack from the other Arab and Muslim countries for making this deal. And so then they came back saying, but we still want to talk about giving the Palestinians a state. And so that's what I'm wondering is that, is this a picture of them coming back saying, oh, well, we'll do this deal with you, but only if you give the Palestinians a state, you know? If you become like us in that you, are considering the Palestinians. So that's one thought that I had. And then in 2 Thessalonians 2:11-12, it says, okay, so remember this. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth but took pleasure in wickedness. Okay, so I believe we're living in the time in the last days where God is allowing this deluding influence. And so I definitely see this with Trump and Netanyahu, is that I think they have this deluding influence, and they're believing things that are false and not really believing what is true. And that might have to do with, how God hardens Pharaoh's heart in the Exodus story, to accomplish his purposes. And so I kind of think because, Trump and Netanyahu have been, not following God, that he's, just allowed this deluding influence to overtake him, so that he can accomplish, so that God can accomplish his purposes. Okay, so then, let's see. Okay, so then this is from 2 Thessalonians 2. Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure, or be disturbed either by a spirit or message, or a letter as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth, and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth but took pleasure in wickedness. So then, brethren, stand firm and hold to the traditions which you were taught, whether by word of mouth or by letter from us. Okay, so this is more of all of the chapter of Second Thessalonians 2. And so, okay, so one of the things is, so I highlighted message, okay? So don't be quickly shaken from your composure, either by a spirit or a message or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. So basically, what Paul is saying, so what I think is like, this is kind of a prophetic shadow of how you don't want to like be believing that the messianic era has started with Trump and that Trump is bringing peace to the Middle East. Okay, so his message or letter about this Trump Accord, this Abraham Accord, don't be quickly shaken thinking, maybe Trump's the Messiah. And so, okay, so what I wrote, and don't be shaken by the fact that Trump and Netanyahu are saying peace, security, and prosperity. Okay, so Trump and Netanyahu are talking like the Messianic kingdom has come. Okay, so that's not good. Okay, and then, so then Paul says, let no one in any way deceive you. Okay, so don't be deceived by this. Okay. And then it says it will not come unless the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed. Okay, so we've seen that this could now be Trump, because we're seeing that he's not even following America's own laws when he's setting up these peace deals. Okay. Okay, and so this man of lawlessness is called the son of destruction, who opposes. Okay, so what I wanted to say about this is everyone's kind of waiting for, not everyone, but like prophecy teachers and stuff are waiting for the third temple to be built. Okay, and then and then they're saying, okay, so the third temple's got to be built, and then the Antichrist is gonna go sit in the temple and declare himself to, that he's God. Okay, well, so what you need to do is have a little bit more imagination and consider that the nation of Israel is a type of the temple of God. Okay, because it really kind of is, because that's where God has chosen to put his name. Okay, just because there's not an actual physical temple doesn't mean that God's forgotten that he's chosen this land. Okay. And so what we do is so what we see is that we still see that, um, okay, so when it says that he takes his seat in the temple of God, it basically means like, it'd be kind of like saying he's camping, he's camping, he's going to Israel and camping himself. I can't think of that expression, but he's setting himself down in there. He's basically putting all his energy in the Middle East, which it's very interesting that he's putting all this time and energy into getting this peace deal going in the Middle East while he's got rioters and looters tearing apart the cities in his own country. Okay, so keep that in mind. And so he's really camping in the Middle East, working on these peace deals, and and really displaying himself, like he's not calling himself God, but he's acting like he has godlike qualities, and he's just able to perform miracles. I mean, seriously. Okay. And then it says, okay, do you remember while I was still with you, I was telling you these things, and you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Okay, so it is, because right now we have the rioters and looters. Okay, only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. Um, um, and then, okay, then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. So, so I'm wondering if, God is the one doing the restraining, and, and then, he's going to move out of the way, well, I mean, I kind of think that's already happened, that, God was, you know, um, restraining things from happening in the world, but then because of judgment, he's allowed the rioters and looters to come to America, and then he's allowing all the stuff to come to Israel to bring judgment on these, two nations for not following, God. Um, and so then the lawless one will be revealed, okay? And so what we're seeing is that Trump's being revealed as being lawless, okay? Um, and then, and then it says the one, so then it says, he will bring him to an end by the appearance of his coming. Okay, so that would be the Messiah is going to bring Trump to an end, okay? Definitely an end to his presidency. Um, so then, so then it says the one who's coming is in accord with the activity of Satan. Okay. So, I mentioned how this peace deal was done on the 13th and then of 23 with all powers and signs and false wonders. Okay. And then I mentioned about the deluding influence. And so the deluding influence, okay, is keeping people from seeing the truth about this person. So that is why he has not been revealed yet. Okay, so when Jesus comes, then he's going to expose these delusions that everyone believes. Okay. And then it's interesting too that it goes on. They did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in wickedness, um, so, um, because we have Trump and, and Netanyahu that they're doing these wicked things because they're caring more about making a name for themselves than following God, and even caring about their own country that they're leaders of. Okay. And so then what does Paul say to us? So then, brethren, stand firm and hold to the traditions which you were taught, whether by word or mouth or by letter from us. So the traditions you want to hold on to is your belief and love for your Lord Jesus Christ. Okay. Okay. And so more about talking about Trump being the man of lawlessness. Okay, so I also think you can read those verses that we just went through and they'll apply to Obama too. Okay, just so you know. Um, um, but we're talking about Trump in this video. And so then I don't know if you saw this article, but this I can't read the date on this, but it, President Trump said he moved the embassy to Jerusalem for the evangelicals. Okay. President Trump says the evangelicals are more excited by controversial Jerusalem embassy move than the Jewish people. Okay, U.S. President Donald Trump said Monday that he moved the United States Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem for the evangelicals, marveling that Christians are more excited by that than Jewish people. We moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, Trump said. That's for the evangelicals. It's amazing with that. The evangelicals are more excited by that than the Jewish people. It's incredible. And the Golan Heights, don't forget that we did the Golan Heights. With the phrase move the capital, Trump appeared to be referring to his decision to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital on December 6, 2017, followed by the official relocation of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem on May 14, 2018. Jerusalem has been Israel's capital since 1949, although many countries do not recognize it as such. Trump made these remarks during an election campaign rally at an airport in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, as he visited Midwestern battleground states, holding campaign events in an effort to counter-program media coverage of the Democratic National Convention, which took place virtually on the same day. Okay, so here was this guy's tweet in response to this article, or in response to what Trump said. And okay, so he said, in other words, the Jews aren't properly appreciative. As history shows, it's never a great thing when an authoritarian leader holds a grudge against the entire Jewish people. Okay, so just kind of an interesting response. But my thoughts are, okay, so one of the reasons why some of the Jewish people are not excited about this embassy move is because if you watch some of my previous videos, I talked about how ever since this embassy has been moved, there had been weekly, every Friday, the Palestinians were rioting on the border. Okay. So if you lived in Israel, you wouldn't be excited about really what happened. I mean, because really moving the embassy to Jerusalem has not really been that helpful to the Jewish people in Israel. I think they would have preferred it just stayed where it was, instead of, because it's really caused Israel to be more odious to their enemies. Okay. So that's Trump taking a seat in the Temple of God in Israel and the Middle East. Okay. Playing God, basically. Making decisions. And really, I wanted to show you this article because I don't really believe he loves the Jewish people. Okay. And so he even said he didn't move the embassy to make the Jewish people happy. He made it to make the evangelicals happy. Okay. So that's that. Okay. So like I said, this Abrahamic Accord is another deal that makes Israel odious to the occupants of the land. Okay. So in Genesis 34, so this is continuing with that story with Jacob. The young man did not delay to do the thing because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Now he was more respected than all the household of his father. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, these men are friendly with us, therefore let them live in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage and give our daughters to them. Only on this condition will the men consent to live with us, to become one people, that every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock and their property and all their animals be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will live with us. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and my men, being few in number, they will gather together against me and attack me, and I will be destroyed, I and my household. So I highlighted this part about he was more respected. So I think, because Shechem went and talked to the other people of, their land, Hamor and his son, and they were respected, and so they said, hey, these guys are being friendly with us, let's live with them and trade with them. Okay, so that is definitely what's happening in the Middle East with the United Arab Emirates. You know, they're, talking to other people, other countries saying, join with us, let's all trade together and everything. Um, so, but and so there are other countries, considering it. Um, um, but there are, um, some nations that are not happy about this deal. Okay, so who is unhappy about this deal? So we got Iran, the Palestinians, Turkey, and Hezbollah are not happy at all about this deal. Okay. So what's kind of interesting about this accord, Abraham Accord, is I think it clears up the mystery of who the three are that go into the fiery furnace. Okay. Um, so then it says, then these men were tied up in their trousers, their coats, their caps, and their clothes, and were cast into the midst of the furnace of the blazing fire. But these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire, still tied up. Okay. So then I found this verse about clothes in Zephaniah 1:8. Because it's kind of interesting that in the story of the fiery furnace, God is mentioning their clothes. Okay. Um, like you almost kind of get a picture of like, you know, um they had a lot of extra clothes on, which you don't need when you're going into the fiery furnace. So it's kind of an interesting uh detail that you want to pay attention to because God's probably saying something. So in Zephaniah 1:8 it says, then it will come about on the day of the Lord's sacrifice that I will punish the princess, the king's son, all who clothe themselves with foreign garments. And so I kind of wondering if that's the prophetic shadow that God's showing us, um, is that, it's these three people, um, you know, e- especially Israel and America are clothed with foreign garments because they're making deals with, God's enemies, basically. Um, and then, it talks about these three men being tied up. And so I wonder if that's like bound together in a peace deal. So we already discussed about how we're in the fiery furnace. But basically, I think um, we're going to see like basically a fiery end to the fiery furnace. So that's what's next. Okay. Here's another picture that kind of connects to the fiery furnace. And so this was on August 21st, which, if you remember that date, that's the anniversary of the Great American Solar Eclipse. So that's very interesting. And so what's interesting is, okay, so this says a dredging vessel at a Texas port hit a natural gas pipeline Friday, sparking an explosion that sent 6 people to the hospital and left 4 others missing, authorities said. Okay, so what stood out to me with this explosion is that it happened in Corpus Christi, which means body of Christ. Okay. Um, so I thought it was kind of interesting that, um, so remember August 21st, too, with the Great American Solar Eclipse is connected to, that was, okay, also on that date was when Trump said, um, he was discussing the tweets that talked about him being the chosen one. And I can't remember what else. There was something else that he said about himself, or another tweet or something. So definitely kind of interesting. And so, I definitely think there's a prophetic picture. I mean, this could be kind of like the writing on the wall for Trump, where, God's saying you're messing with the body of Christ with this peace deal. Um, because you know how the Jewish people are Jesus's brothers. Okay. Um, so let's see. So the peace deal happened on the 13th. So this explosion happened 8 days later. Okay. So I definitely think that's uh very significant. Um, and then here's the pictures from the Beirut explosion that happened 8/4/2020. It was interesting. That was Obama's birthday. Like I said, I think this is when the fiery furnace started. Okay, that we're now under judgment in the fiery furnace. But like I said, I think we're gonna see a fiery explosion at the end of this whole time frame, um, because um, I'm really expecting Israel to get attacked by its enemies. So what's interesting about August 4th, it was the 71st day of the riots. And then it's 39 days before 9/11, 2020. 39 is the number of stripes. It was the number of times, like Paul mentions how he was. See, the Jewish people had this tradition before, when they used to whip people, is that they would whip them 39 times and not 40, because the Torah talks about, don't, some about don't do more than 40 or something, so they do 39 to be safe, um, which really doesn't sound all that great. And then with the Beirut explosion, they said there was 191 deaths. So I'm kind of wondering if you look at the 191, that could connect to 9/11. So all very interesting. And then so I want to talk about judgment for Trump's Abraham Accord. Okay, so 3 days before was when they had the shooting at the White House. Basically, some guy was trying to get Trump, going after Trump, and so they shot that guy. It's funny because I don't think I was able to find any follow-up stories on that, so it just didn't get reported much. The derecho in the Midwest happened on that day, 8/10. Okay, that was the winds that just created a lot of damage. The storms that created a lot of damage in the Midwest. The day of 8/13, the day of the Accord, was the third deadliest day for COVID deaths. That was when the California wildfires flared up. 2 days later, on 8/15, Trump's brother dies. Okay. So I have this verse from Ezekiel that connects to that, and it says, Son of man, behold, I am about to take from you the desire of your eyes with a blow. But you shall not mourn, and you shall not weep, and your tears shall not come. Groan silently, and do not cover your mustache. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Don't cover your mustache, because, I thought I could connect that to the fact that Trump doesn't wear a mask. So, I mean, I do know that, many times for judgment or for chastisement, God will take away something that's important to us. Okay. Okay, so then on 8/20, there was two tropical depressions, 13 and 14. And so I highlighted the 13 number there. Okay, so because I thought the numbers were interesting. So 8/21 was that explosion in Corpus Christi we talked about. 8/23 was when the riots started in Wisconsin. A24 was okay. So I thought this was interesting during Trump's Republican National Committee. Um, that first we had Tropical Storm Markle hit the first day of the RNC, and then on A25 was when the evacuation started for Hurricane Laura, and then Hurricane Laura was blowing into town A26 to A27. Okay, so a lot of people, especially down south, were more focused on Hurricane Laura than the RNC. So I think that was judgment for Trump. And then A27, um, also there was protests at the White House on the last day of Trump's RNC, um, and they actually put up a gallows for Trump at these protests. Um, and then judgment for Netanyahu, and and so some of this stuff's still ongoing. We still got the fires in the West are still happening. Um, and then the rioting I think still going on in Wisconsin and things like that. So and then some of the judgment for Netanyahu, like I said, on 8/6 was when the incendiary devices on balloons, which start fires in Israel, were coming from Gaza. 8/14 there was protests in Israel against Netanyahu. 8/15 there was 19 blazes in Israel because of these balloons. Escalation with Gaza, second night of protest. 8/19 they actually had a protest. Let me think. Protests in Gaza about the peace deal. I think I put that in quotes because I think it might have been more rioting. I don't remember. But that happened on 8/19, and then 8/22, Hamas met with Erdogan. Okay, so they're starting to kind of join up in their, in the fact that, this is the problem that now Israel's enemies are, they're starting to, join forces with their, kind of the enemy is my friend kind of thing. So when Hamas met with Erdogan, they discussed their unity movement with Fatah, Hamas, and other Palestinian factions. So they're all starting to join forces. And then in 8/23, they had 28 fires in Israel. On 8/25/26, they had tensions with Hezbollah. Israel had tensions with Hezbollah. It was the fourth week of incendiary balloons. Okay, so actually, I think I said 3 weeks earlier, but actually went on for 4 weeks. 8/28, there was 6 rockets from Gaza toward Israel. 8/31 was they talked about that they had 1 month of being on alert because of Hezbollah. And so Hezbollah actually attempted several attacks in the month of August. And then 9/1, they actually were able to get a ceasefire with Hamas with Qatar's help. But the deal with this, okay, so this was actually, I think Gantz was involved with this ceasefire too in Qatar. Israel, they actually gave Gaza, they expanded Gaza's fishing zone with this ceasefire. Okay, so like I said, all the deals always involve Israel giving up stuff. Okay, and Qatar is actually planning to pump $30 million into Gaza. Okay, so this is not a good ceasefire at all. Okay, not good for Israel at all. Okay, and then on 9/3. Okay, so 9/3. So it's been interesting if you've been following what's going on in Israel. Their coronavirus rates are going up really high. Okay, so they announced on 9/3 that they were planning to do a lockdown on what they call red cities starting on 9/7, Labor Day. And so actually what they ended up doing is they put a curfew on 40 cities. So starting at 7 o'clock every night, everyone has to be in lockdown in these 40 cities in Israel. So that's not good. And then on 9/4 was the hottest day in Israeli history. So it was 120 degrees in Eilat and 109 degrees in Jerusalem. And 186 people were treated by medics. Okay, so they're definitely suffering judgment over there. Okay. So I talked about this, don't divide the land. Okay. Um, and I talked about how a bunch of stuff happens on the 26th for some reason. I don't totally know what the connection is. But so on August 26th, we had Hurricane Laura was approaching on that day. Okay. I think her actual date that she hit was the 27th. Although, no, actually, she might have started hitting on the 26th. So I got Trump's two peace plans, quote unquote, peace plans over here on listed in this little box. So January 28, 2020 was Trump's Peace to Prosperity. And that happened on week 111 after. Okay, so that would be the 111th week after Trump declared that he was going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And then August 13, 2020 is this Abraham Accord. That ended up being 140 weeks after his announcement, or yeah, of moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Okay. So let's see. So I wanted to talk about the fact that we now have two peace deals out there. Don't divide the land. Two peace deals. The princes of Judah have become like those who move a boundary. On them I will pour out my wrath like water. So what I believe is that the two peace deals connect to the two dreams of Joseph, the two dreams of Pharaoh, the two banquets of Esther, the two sales of Joseph. If you actually read the story of Joseph being sold, it's almost like he gets sold twice. The two visits to Joseph by his brothers, the two rooster crows. I have that verse here. We'll talk about that. The dream of the cupbearer plus the dream of the baker. Okay, so and lots of other twos in the scriptures. Okay, so Revelation 12:14 says, "But the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she could fly into the wilderness to her place, where she was nourished for times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent." So basically, what I'm thinking is because this picture of the woman flying into the wilderness with these two wings is basically the Christians or America basically flying. It's a picture of them now being under judgment in the wilderness. Okay. Because of the two peace deals. Okay. And then and then we also see in scripture, like at the end of 2 full years. So at the end of 2 full peace deals, certain things happen. And then, so we see that phrase. And then Mark, so I think really Joseph shows up at the end of 2 full years, and Joseph's a messianic figure. Mark 14. Okay, so this, so in this verse, let me read this to you. Immediately a rooster crowed a second time, and Peter remembered how Jesus had made the remark to him. Before a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he began to weep. Okay, so the two peace deals, you will deny me 3 times connects to the 666. Okay. Um, and then in Genesis 41, okay, let's read this. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by God and God will quickly bring it about. Okay, so here's what I think it means. First of all, I've said this before, like, Trump and Netanyahu are dreaming if they think they could bring peace to the Middle East. Okay, so I think sometimes these dreams in scripture are the prophetic shadows of these peace deals. Okay, and then what I think it means is, now that we've seen the second peace deal, we can expect God to quickly bring about his judgment and his plans for the end of days. Okay, so the cupbearer's dream. Let's see, let's read about this. Then it came about after these things, the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was furious with his 2 officials, so he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, in the jail, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. The captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in jail, both had a dream the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. He asked Pharaoh's officials who were with them in confinement in his master's house, why are your faces so sad today? Then they said to him, we have had a dream and there is no one to interpret it. Then Joseph said to him, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your formal custom when you were his cupbearer. Only keep me in mind when it goes well with you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should have put me into the dungeon. Okay, so when it says the cupbearer and the baker for the king offended their lord, the king of Egypt, okay, that's a picture of how America and Israel have offended God because they don't follow God. Okay, so Pharaoh was furious with his 2 officials. That's a picture of God being, furious with America and Israel. And so then God puts him in confinement in the same place where Joseph was imprisoned, so that's a picture. Joseph is a messianic figure. And then it says the captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of him. And they were in confinement for some time. So that's a picture of Trump in charge of, America. And then, so then it says the cupbearer and the baker both had a dream, each with his own dream and each with his own interpretation. So basically what I talked about before about how Trump and Netanyahu believe different things about the peace deals, okay? What are they really agreeing on? And then it says, when Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. Okay, Jesus comes to them in the morning after coronavirus, riots, and then Israel gets attacked. Okay. And so then, okay, so then it's interesting because it says there's a vine, and on the vine were 3 branches. And so what I think that connects to is that there's actually a couple different things going on. One, it connects to the 3 time frames of judgment in America for these peace deals. Okay, but then also it talks about the budding, the blossoms, and the ripe grapes, and I think that connects to the three groups of people in America. And so the buds would be God's people, the blossoms would be Trump's people, and the ripe grapes would be, um, the grapes of wrath would be the rioters. And then, so what's interesting is that in this story it says, okay, the three branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. Okay. And you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your formal custom when you were his cupbearer. Okay, so basically what I think this is that these 3 days connect to the deal of the century. Okay, the cupbearer's dream connects to the deal of the century. And then it says, within 3 more days, you will be restored to your office. The cupbearer got restored to his office. Okay. Trump actually was acquitted on February 5th, 2020, which was that I think that might have been the 8th day after the deal of the century. Um, and then um, um, and then it says you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand. Okay, so I think that's what that's a picture of, is that now because of his actions, he's causing God's cup of judgment, to come, you know, to America, basically putting it into America's hands. And then and then Joseph says, keep me in mind when it goes well with you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. Okay. So basically what we've seen is that Trump, okay, with the deal of the century, he remembers the Palestinians, but not the Jewish people. Okay. And then, and so we've seen that also too with his second peace plan. It's not really about making life better for the Jewish people. Um, so, and he's not remembering that the Jewish people are Jesus's brothers. Okay, so then let's read about the baker. When the chief baker saw that he had interpreted favorably, he said to Joseph, I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And in the top basket, there were some of all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh. And the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Then Joseph answered and said, this is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. Thus it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted to him. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Okay. So, so what I believe is that the baker's dream connects to the United Arab Emirates dream. Okay. And so then, the chief baker would be a picture of Netanyahu. And then he says, behold, there are 3 baskets of white bread on my head. So, I wrote, that they connect to the deal of the century, or 666. You know, but, it's interesting too that they could also connect to the 3 groups of people in the United Arab Emirates deal. And then, but it also could connect to the 3 time frames of judgment for Israel, because it talks about, in the top basket, which is the 3rd time frame, there was some of all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh. Okay. In Leviticus 6:21, we see the grain offering for God is baked pieces. Okay. So the third time frame for Israel connect to this fiery furnace thing. Okay. Um, and then it says the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Okay, birds of prey eat carcasses, according to Genesis 15:11. Okay, so then Joseph interprets and says the three baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, which are the three time frames for Israel, which I think are coronavirus, rioting, and being attacked. Um, well, like being attacked or just would be the end of the whole fiery furnace thing. Would be the third time frame. And then Pharaoh will lift up your head from you. Okay, so God's going to remove his protection from Israel. And then he will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. That's a crucifixion picture. Thus it came about on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday. So I wrote, the fiery furnace started on Obama's birthday. But I also talked about how tomorrow, 9/11, which is probably now, is also the 7th month and the 14th day after the deal of the century, which connects to Trump's birthday, by the way. And so then it says on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. So this feast connects to the UAE peace deal, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And so I wrote, like, Trump and Netanyahu get pulled out of the pit with this peace deal. Now all of a sudden they're looking better. And then it says he restored the chief cupbearer to his office. So Netanyahu gave Trump power with this peace deal, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Okay, so Trump passes the power to Egypt. Basically, so now giving more power to the Arab and Muslim countries with these peace deals. And then it's this whole picture of, this all has to do with Revelation 17 and 18, where they're all drinking the cup of the harlot, basically. The merchants that we see in Revelation 18. Okay, and the merchants are the ones that are all surprised when Babylon, the city, gets attacked. So they're all going to be surprised when Israel gets attacked. Then it says, but he hung the chief baker. Okay, that connects to the gallows for Mordecai, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer, Trump, the harlot of Babylon, did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. And then Trump does not keep Israel in mind in his peace deals. Birds will eat your flesh off of you. Birds of prey against her on every side, against Israel. And then I highlighted the verse 19 because it says, within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. Because I'm wondering about 9/11, which is 19 years after 9/11, 2001. Okay. Looking at that date now. I have a whole video on that. Okay. So then let's read this in Jeremiah. It says, I have forsaken my house, I have abandoned my inheritance, I have given the beloved of my soul into the hands of her enemies. My inheritance has become to me like a lion in the forest. She has roared against me, therefore I have come to hate her. Is my inheritance like a speckled bird of prey to me? Are the birds of prey against her on every side? Go, gather all the beasts of the field, bring them down to devour. Many shepherds have ruined my vineyard. They have trampled down my fields. They have made my pleasant field a desolate wilderness. It has been made a desolation, desolate, it mourns before me. The whole land has been made desolate because no man lays it to heart. On all the bare heights in the wilderness, destroyers have come, for a sword of the Lord is devouring from one end of the land even to the other. There is no peace for anyone. They have sown wheat and reaped thorns. They have strained themselves to no profit. But be ashamed of your harvest because of the fierce anger of the Lord. Thus says the Lord concerning all my wicked neighbors who strike at the inheritance with which I have endowed my people Israel. Behold, I am about to uproot them from their land, and will uproot the house of Judah from among them. And it will come about that after I have uprooted them, I will again have compassion on them, and I will bring them back, each one to his inheritance, and each one to his land. So, God says, I have forsaken my heart, my house, and abandoned my inheritance. I have given the beloved of my soul into the hand of her enemies. Okay. So what's interesting is you could read these verses and they apply to, you could read them and they apply to America, and then you could turn around and read them and they apply to Israel. Okay. Because in America we got the rioters, in Israel they were having problems with Hamas, and Hezbollah, and then, and then they're going to be, there's going to be one final attack on them, before the Messiah shows up, or as the Messiah is showing up. And then it says, so we see this, are the birds of prey against her on every side. Okay, that's definitely connected to Israel. And then the part where it says, many shepherds have ruined my vineyard, that's a picture of America. So the whole land has been desolate because no man lays it to heart. Okay, so that's a picture of how nobody really cares about Israel. No one loves Israel like God loves Israel. Okay, and then it goes on to say there is no peace for anyone. Okay, I highlighted that. Okay, there's no peace, and then, and then God says, behold, I'm about to uproot them from their land, and will uproot the house of Judah from among them. Okay, so there's, it's prophesied that, God's about to, see, what's interesting too, that he uses that word uproot, because that connects to, there's three horns that get uprooted, by, they either get uprooted by the other horn, the little horn, or, or one of the beasts. I'm not really sure. So, anyways, but we see that term. I mean, I think it connects to the little horn. So, let's see. Okay, so the mark of the beast. Okay, so Revelation 13, it talks about the beast coming up from the earth. So I've talked about this a lot in my videos. But I think what I did is I updated it to, include kind of this peace deal. Okay, so what we have with the beast is that the beast out of the earth has two horns. So does that connect to Trump's two peace deals? I mean, I thought they connected to Trump and Netanyahu. And then, but the two horns too connects to Trump doing stuff like Obama. Okay, so then it says he makes the earth and those who dwell on it to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. Trump causes people to worship Obama, who will have his wound healed when he returns to power. He performs great signs, the 666, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. Trump causes God's judgment to come to America because of how it treated Israel. Okay, so think about fire coming down out of heaven to the earth. Okay, what's happening in the west of the western United States, is fire. Fire. It's definitely, we have fire tornadoes and, things like that. So we're definitely under judgment with fire in this country. And then it says he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given to perform in the presence of the beast. causing those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword. Okay, the peace deal is similar to what Obama did, favoring the Arab nations over Israel, and has come to life. So it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Okay. So peace deal is similar to what Obama did, favoring the Arab nations over Israel. Okay. The Arab nations in the peace deal are pushing their agendas. Okay. So this is what's happening is that, this beast that he's creating, the image of the beast, which actually is, Babylon. Okay. So the image of the beast would even speak. So the people in this peace deal are pushing their agendas, okay? And cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Okay, Israel is not caving into peace deals except for Netanyahu and Gantz, so their way of life gets killed. Ultimately, Israel will get killed because Trump is giving their enemies the advantage. Trump's going to cause Israel to get killed. So basically, like, the people that aren't falling for Trump, they're not worshiping this image of the beast. They're not looking at this peace deal like it's a true peace deal. They're still gonna end up getting killed, you know, you know, um, because Trump's making Israel odious, with these peace deals and stuff. And then it says he causes all the small, the great, the rich and the poor, the free men and the slaves to be given a mark on their right hand or forehead. Okay, if you think of mark being like the mark of judgment, we are all marked for judgment. Okay. And he provides that no one be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark. Okay. Buying and selling only for those who are part of the peace deals. So people that are marked for judgment, anyways, all these people that are part of these peace deals are, that's kind of the thing. Like, he's trying to create this economic alliance, and so those are going to be the ones able to buy or sell. Okay. And then it says those who have the mark, either the name of the beast, the Abrahamic deal, or the number of his name, 666. Here is wisdom. Let him who is understanding calculate the number of the beast. Okay. 666. Okay. And Daniel 7. So I talked about all this too. Netanyahu and Gantz are the lion with eagle wings. Their wings are plucked. They stand on 2 feet. So Netanyahu, the wings are plucked because they are following Trump and not waiting for Messiah to come and to give them peace. But also, the picture of the wings being plucked, if you think of, Trump being this false eagle, this false Messiah, the wings get plucked when, they get attacked, then Trump will no longer look like a Messiah. So Trump's the bear with the 3 ribs in his mouth, eating, eating Adam's rib, 666. Or you know what that is? I think the 3 ribs probably connect to the side of Adam. So, anyways, but he's still eating them. Okay. And then the leopard with the 4 wings like a bird, the 4 heads. So Obama BLM with black, brown, white issues, other people connected to Obama that go to attack Israel, Turkey, Hamas, Fatah, other Palestinian factions. Is that the 4 heads? Okay, we see 4 things, 4 groups of people, joining up together. And that would match the beast from the sea that we see in Revelation. Then there's the fourth beast with the 10 horns. Those are BLM rioting. And then it says, while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boast. So I used to think that this was who was going to attack Israel, but when I studied this again, what I'm wondering is if the little horn could be Trump, if the leopard with the 4 wings is the one who attacks Israel, then the little horn could be Trump, and because the little horn gets time, times, and half a time, which connects to 3.5 years, which is the time frame right now that we've had for Trump. And then it says 3 horns get pulled out by the roots. Okay, so the 3 horns that get pulled out by the roots could be Trump, Netanyahu, and UAE, which matches Daniel's 3 friends in the fiery furnace and Noah's 3 sons. So is it Christians, Jews, and Arabs that get killed in the attack on Israel? Are those the 3 horns that get pulled out by the roots? I mean, basically it's going to shake everybody's foundation, these 3 groups of people. So that's what I'm wondering. Okay. And then so I talked about this, like, especially in my 9/11 video, where if you see Israel burning on the right and America burning on the left, then you are out of time. Okay. Except, unless you follow the Messiah, basically. Which the Messiah himself is, out of time. Like, he's kind of not connected to time. He's I don't know how to explain it, but in a good way, the Messiah is out of time. So then it says another angel, a second one followed. Okay, so I highlighted second one because that connects to the 2 peace deals. Followed, saying, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. Okay. And then in Revelation 10, we have this strong angel coming down out of heaven, clothed with the cloud, and the rainbow was upon his head, and his face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. Okay. And he had in his hand a little book which was open. Okay, so I'm wondering if this is a picture of Trump, that this little book is the peace deal. So if you think of a book of the 2 sides of the book, okay, the 2 peace deals. And it says he placed his right hand on the sea and his left on the land. Okay, Trump definitely has his foot on the land of Israel. And he cried out with a loud voice as when a lion roars. And when he had cried out, the 7 peals of thunder uttered their voices. So basically what I think that is that, like, God has John seal up the things that the 7 peals of thunder have spoken. So I think that could be connected to God's enemies. And, I mean, the 7 peals of thunder could connect to the 7 heads with blasphemous names, and so basically just seal it up because, the things that these 7 peals of thunder have said are probably things that God's people don't need to worry about. Because basically, I think what this is showing is that, when Trump, cries out with a loud voice, he's causing God, God's enemies to utter their voices. Basically, we've seen, now the rioters are in America. So the next second fallen is of Babylon is the fiery furnace. Okay, so while Daniel is in the lion's den, which that's a picture of America and the rioters, then we have Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold. The height was 60 cubits and his width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So those are, um, like the deal of the century could be the 60 cubits, and the UAE deal could be the 6 cubits. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent word to assemble all these people um, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So that's a picture of how right now Trump is trying to get others to join this big peace movement. Okay, this big normalization of relations. Okay, and then there are certain Jews whom you appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Okay, so I think that could be a picture of the three horns that get pulled up by the roots. Okay, and so now in this story, it's like the king would be a picture of any of those people that are angry about the peace deal. Okay, because then it says Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. Which could connect to those 7 peals of thunder too. That's an interesting thought. Okay. And then he commanded certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. Okay, so let's see. So Nebuchadnezzar could be the leopard filled with wrath. And then he answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. So instead of just a few missiles at a time, we could see a bunch of missiles dumped on Israel all at once, which they've already figured out. The enemies of Israel have already figured out that that's how they could trick out their Iron Dome protection system, is just really lobbing a bunch of missiles all at once. And then I just thought it was interesting because it says he commanded certain valiant warriors to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. That could connect to how they're all tied up together in this peace deal, but also could be a picture too of how Israel's put in lockdown now for the coronavirus. And then these men were tied up in their clothes. I already talked about that. So then it says, then it will come about on the day of the Lord's sacrifice that I will punish the princes, the king's sons, and all who clothe themselves with foreign garments. And then it says so then it says, because the king's command was urgent, the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame of the fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So I have this verse from Isaiah. At evening time, behold, there is a terror. Before morning they are no more. Such will be the portion of those who plunder us and the lot of those who pillage us. So there's a lot of scriptures in the Bible that talk about, like, don't dig a pit or you'll end up falling into it. And those who live by the sword will die by the sword. So I think we're actually gonna see like sudden judgment on the nations that are attacking Israel. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And then so the 3 men fell into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire, still tied up. And Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded and stood up in haste. He said to his high officials, Was it not 3 men we cast bound into the midst of the fire? They replied to the king, Certainly, O king. He said, Look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm. And the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods. Okay, so the Messiah comes out of the fiery furnace is a picture of the burning bush. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. Okay, so while Israel is burning, we're going to see the Messiah come out of the fire. Not burnt. If that makes any sense. Okay. So let's see. This is I think I talked about this before. I had some 1260 and 1290 days. So since I talked about that, so I think we've already had the fulfillment of the 1260 days and the 1290 days. The 1260 days definitely connects to Revelation 12:6 talks about the 1260 days, and so that connects to like Trump making his announcement on December 6th. But let's talk about 1335 because I've already talked about those. Let's see, the 1335 days, it says, How blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains the 1335 days. September 15, 2020 is 1335 days from Trump's inauguration on 1/20/2017. So I'm wondering, Daniel 9:27, that's when we read, He will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. So if you take the verse and you apply it to Trump first, okay, there's always multiple fulfillments in prophecy, I believe. And then, so it says he makes a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. That would be like 7 years or something like that. And then it says in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrificing grain offerings. So, sometime after Trump's 42 months in office is when, he announced this UAE peace accord. And so a stop to sacrifice could be a stop to the annexation. And then a stop to the grain offering could be Trump stopping America's willingness to consider Israel's military advantage. Okay. So that, when you apply that to Trump. Okay. But what's interesting is that, do I have this on the next page? Is that if you take after 9/11, if you take the week from 9/12 to 9/18, I think, in the middle of the week is Trump's 1335th day. September 15th would be the middle of that week. So definitely this is why this is a high watch date. This is why 9/11 is a high watch date. So if you haven't figured out, Trump is the harlot of Babylon. Genesis 11 is about the fall of Babel. Okay. So, it says, they were all speaking the same language. They said to one another, Come, let us make bricks and burn thoroughly. That could be a picture of the rioters. And it says they used brick for stone and they used tar for mortar. They said, Come, let us build ourselves a city. That could be the deal of the century. And, because that connected to moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And then a tower could be connected to the UAE deal, whose top will reach into heaven, which is Israel. And let us make for ourselves a name, otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. Okay, so was that Trump and Netanyahu's motivation for making this peace deal? the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of man have built. The Lord said, Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language, and this is what they have begun to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, and so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them. Okay, so if Israel gets attacked, would that not confuse this whole peace deal thing? I think so. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. Okay, so look at that verse number. It's 11:9. Okay, so I think that could be significant. Okay, and then we also see there's 19 years from the exile of the northern kingdom to the exile of the southern kingdom, which is why we're looking at 9/11, because it's the 19th anniversary of 9/11. Okay, sorry, I got a little lost here. Okay, and then, so Revelation 17, I think, is a picture of the lion's den. Okay, so, because what we see in there is the 10 horns who hate the harlot. Okay, so that's a picture of the rioters. And then Revelation 18 is the fiery furnace. It talks about the smoke of her burning. Okay. In Revelation 18:8-11, it says, For this reason, in one day your plagues will come, pestilence, mourning, and famine. Okay, there's 3 things listed there. And she will be burned up with fire, for the Lord who judges her is strong. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Okay, so see that connection to this economic peace deal, because it's about the merchants of the earth. Okay, so if Israel gets attacked, we're going to be seeing UAE is going to mourn, because it was all about making this big economic deal. Okay, and then so remember too, when Jesus, the first time he was on earth, Jesus entered the temple and drove out all those who were buying and selling in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. Doves is a picture of peace deals, okay? And he said to them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but you are making it a robber's den, okay? So definitely, I think, we're going to see that when Jesus comes, okay? And then Jeremiah 9:11, I will make Jerusalem a heap of rooms, a haunt of jackals. That's a picture of America's, the rioters. And I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant. That's the destruction of Israel. What was interesting is that on September 7th, on Monday, we had 2 tropical storms were forming, and they were numbered 17 and 18th. Okay, that was before they were named. They get a number when they're just a tropical, not a tropical storm, but a tropical something. When they first start watching them. So 17 and 18. So I thought that was very interesting, because I think that connects to Revelation 17 and 18. And then, I won't talk about this, because I think I talked about this in another one of my videos. Oh, I guess that's all I have. So what I really think is that another way to look at 1335 is that, you have, the deal of the century, and then we moved into the 3 time frames of judgment for America, and then the 3 time frames of judgment, well, for Israel. I mean, those happened at the same time. And then the 5 connects to the time of the Messiah, or the dividing of time. And then though this connects to in Esther, she says, you know, she talks about 30 days, so that could connect to, Trump's deal of the century, um, would be, the 3 days of 666. Um, but then also it could connect to the final 30 days of the UAE deal, is what I'm wondering. Okay, which brings us to 9/11. Okay. Um, so definitely very interesting. And then um, um, anything new on this slide? So I was trying to break up like the three time frames of judgment. Definitely the first one was the coronavirus shutdown. I'm not really sure in America. I have like the second day could be the 30-day time frame where we have Trump's people protesting. They were trying to open the country. And then the third day would be 110 days of Obama's people rioting the Lion's Den. But I'm kind of wondering if what I got for the second time frame is not really, I mean, because the fiery furnace really could be the third time frame too in America. Okay. um but what's interesting is that if you look at the 110 days of Obama's people rioting, it's actually 9/11 is actually 109 days of rioting. I mean, because I'm assuming it's not going to stop until Jesus comes and puts a restraint on it. But it was interesting. Day 71 would have been the start of the fiery furnace. Day 80 was the UAE deal. And then so the three time frames for the Jews are the coronavirus shutdown, the people protesting in Israel against Netanyahu could be the second time frame. The third time frame could be the this fiery furnace, which started with the lobbing of the balloons with the incendiary devices, which I think is going to culminate in Israel getting attacked. And so then the five, the time of Messiah, that can connect to the second banquet of Esther, which is when Haman is exposed. So I think what the deal was, I did it one way connected to the deal of the century, and then another way connected to UAE deal. Okay, so that's the deal. Okay, so basically, that is Trump's peace plan. So that is what I think might be happening. And so definitely high watch date 9/11, which is probably when I'm posting this video. But I wanted you to be aware of the fact that I think we're under judgment for this peace plan. So like Hurricane Laura, I guess I didn't go into details about that, but it was very interesting because that was, it kind of hit around the same time frame as Katrina. Okay. And it was interesting too because it was also around the same area that Hurricane Rita hit. And Katrina and Rita were really connected to, I don't remember what it was, but it was definitely judgment for something. Oh, it was when America strongly encouraged Israel to remove people from, I think it might have been the West Bank. And so because someone has actually done a study about how, kind of like God's judgment has to do with an eye for an eye, and just as the Jewish people had to move out of their homes. I know, like, Kush Katif was one of the areas where the Jewish people had to move out of their homes. Um, and, so America was under judgment because, they were highly forcing whatever Israel to do that. Okay, and so we saw So then we saw kind of a repeat with Hurricane Laura. So that's the deal. That's what I believe in. Then the devastation with Hurricane Laura was just awful. Okay. And like I said too, we had that derecho in the Midwest, and then now we got the fires. So not good. So that's why we definitely need the Messiah to come to save us. We're all marked for judgment, and we need Jesus to come and to, put the seal of God on us and put us in our booths and protect us. So, okay. Well, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you tuning in. And pray that you'll hang in there and just be blessed. Look up for your redemption draws nigh. I think we can expect the Messiah very soon. So God bless, and we will catch you later.